Welcome back to I Am African, the podcast. I am your host, Liz, and of course, I have some amazing guests with me. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves. I'll start with Ubo, and then we'll go with everyone.
Thank you, Liz, for this. This is awesome. Very exciting to be here. My name is Ubo, and I am Nigerian, as you see the flag there. My experience is a little half and half Nigerian and half in the States. So I'm excited to be here.
Okay, thank you, Ubo. Linda?
Linda, or CB, as those that really know me call me. I am Zambian, but married to a Nigerian, so by force have become Nigerian. Moved to the US when I was about 12 years old, so I guess a little bit of American in me now.
Wow, okay. Thank you, thank you. And by the way, I lived in Zambia before.
Claim it.
There's oh no. I'm Congolese. But anyways, last but not least, you've seen this face multiple times already, but this is my producer, but also a guest, Roddy.
Hey everyone, my name is Roddy. I'm back again with I'm African with Liz, and originally from Congo, and grew up here in the U.S. And then we're here for another one. Let's go.
Okay, I like that. That was so short and sweet to move. The topic for today is women versus men. What are we programmed to do? So we'll be talking about gender roles and expectations in African culture. So then we're going to explore the societal pressures on men and women in African communities and of course the things that they're programmed to do and what things they do differently. So we're going to discuss the roles, like how the roles evolve and clash when Africans move to the West. So we're going to start with Africa, how, women are conditioned and how men are conditioned. And then like we talk about like, do these things change when people move out of Africa to the Western world? And then the question for today and for my guest is, how do you feel about the traditional gender roles in your culture? And I'm glad that we have people from different countries so we can hear different perspectives. We'll start with Linda this time. How do you feel about traditional gender roles in your culture?
Zambia is a little bit different. I feel like for the most part, it's, like most African countries, women are expected to, play the home duties, cook, take care of the family, take care of their husband, make sure everything is good at home. But I don't know if people know the statistics. A lot of Zambian men, sadly, just the life expectancy is not very high. And so when you're being raised up, you're traditionally brought up to obviously they still value education. So for me personally, or anybody that I know that's from Zambia, as a young girl, there's really no big difference between how the boys were brought up and how the girls were brought up. Everyone had to go to school, but the expectation was you do your homework, the guys can go outside and play, you go and wash the dishes, you go and cook, get things ready. So it's like an extra duty for the girls growing up. But as people get married or when you become a wife, you play those gender roles for a little bit, but it doesn't seem to last very long because like I said, there's a lot of widows, and at least for my experience, a lot of women lose their husbands early on, and so the role expectation changes very quickly, and you find a lot of them also playing that provider role. That's more traditional to the men. I feel like the gender roles weren't very strict in Zambia, honestly. Maybe it's just my experience. I feel like there's a lot of leniency in what girls can do. I feel like they're more progressive because Zambians, I don't know, it's like they copy America. They just think America is like the top of the top. So whatever they see on TV is what's cool and it's easily like passed on in their households. So I would say it's more progressive than a lot of other African countries, especially like being married to a Nigerian now, just like our differences, even in our marriage, how I was brought up, what the expectations are, and just me being a girl and I have three other brothers. If you look at the girls, we're just as educated as alpha female as they come as some of my brothers. So I feel I don't have any strong feeling about it. I feel like it was a good balance from my experience. Now, like I said, I came when I was 12, so maybe it's just like a short recap of my experience.
I will let Roddy go and talk, and then we'll go to Ubo.
Yeah. So for me, it depends on how you grew up, right? But I can see it from like my other siblings, right? I mean, Congo, when you grow up in certain area, not just say the village or anything, the way they call it over there. On the countryside, it's more really serious. How a woman is caring versus a man, right? I think for men, the expectation for men, they expect you to do a lot of duty as a man, not just play soccer outside, but also help a lot with heavy lifting and maybe helping your mom, helping your siblings with like things that men's supposed to do, and also to be responsible and to have a sense of leadership in what you do. I think that's how we were raised, and I think that's important. When it came to like growing up with sisters, I have siblings, so unfortunately they never really stressed on me on taking the role of like cooking and making doing women stuff, because again they keep I mean, the African are so good at keeping those two entities separate, right? The pros of doing that is a man, you know your job as a man, and then you respect that role. And then the woman, you know your job as a woman, So growing up, you see that, and it gives you that identity, like, hey, I'm a man because men do this. But leaving the country and coming here to the US, then it opens your mind to a different spectrum. Like, oh, yo, a man can actually do this. There's nothing wrong with that. So
Yeah.
it gives you the ability to learn and the ability to balance both. But I think the strong foundation we get it from Africa, and then it makes us who we are. So yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. And Linda, I actually appreciate you sharing what you shared because it's very different, like, especially with me having spent time in Zambia. So I'll come back and address your response and Roddy, and also your response on like the men's side to hear what Ubo has to say.
Wow. Okay, no pressure. As the Nigerian in the group, I'm gonna keep it interesting. So, just to give a brief background, I'm actually an only child, right? So, no siblings except step siblings. But when I was raised with both, as Roddy mentioned, the leadership aspect, right? So, being able to lead and be decisive and make decisions on behalf of others. And from Linda's perspective, being able to cook and clean and take care of the home. So I was actually raised with both, right? So I know how to cook, know how to clean, I also know how to lead and be the leader as needed, right? So it's been an interesting, I would say, struggle between the two because you can't do both well, right? As a leader, you need time to think and decide the best path. As someone who takes care of the home, you need to be able to be more attentive of the home and people's needs. So one of my biggest challenges, especially coming to the States, was balancing the two, right? So how do you balance which one am I in this situation? Am I trying to be the leader? Am I trying to be the provider? Am I trying to be the home caretaker? And fun fact, I love kids. So spending time with kids for me is just like it's a blessing, right? So it's always been interesting trying to decide. One of the biggest things I learned though in the States, especially transitioning, is everybody cannot do everything, right? You have to have your strengths and weaknesses, and you have to rely on each other to succeed together, right? Which I can get deeper into that, but that's the biggest change I've learned in the States. As much as we try to preach equality, which there are things that you can be equal at, but there are other things where you absolutely have your strengths, and you need to rely on each other to succeed together, right? So I know this sounds like corporate speak, but teamwork really does make the dream work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, okay. I didn't see that coming, but thank you. Well, I'm going to go and address Linda, right? You sharing the experience. I for part of my life, I grew up in a refugee camp in Zambia. And I guess what Linda's experiencing, like, what your experience was in Zambia, like as a woman, is very different to my experience. And I think when you said that, it hit me that it's the environment as well, right? Like I was in a refugee camp with Congolese people, Rwandese people, Burundians, like all the people that were like living life that was not like conditioned like the Western world. Let's say in Zambia, they were like America. Even when we came there, they wanted us to speak English and they wanted us to speak as good as we could so we can be like Americans. But at the same time, when we go home, it's different. The Congolese side is still there. They still remind you, oh, you are a girl. You need to be in the kitchen. Before I went to school, I had to wake up, sweep the yard, clean, like, go fetch water, birth my siblings, and then shower, and then go to school. When I come back from school, I have to cook because, that's the next thing as a girl that I have to do. But for me, growing up, I was a tomboy. So I would do all that very quickly. And then I joined my brothers to go play because I was born with like 8 brothers. So I would try to like speed up the process of like the womanly duties and then go play with my brothers. So it's very like, it's nice to see that there were other parts of that life that were more advanced than what I was privy to. So
Yeah.
thank you
So
so
I
much
think
for
like
sharing
what
that.
Roddy said, sorry, just to add, like I grew up in the capital city of Osaka. That's one thing I forgot to
Yeah.
mention. So obviously if you're going anywhere outside of the capital city, like you said, if it's a village or just a little bit more rural,
Hmm.
completely
Hmm.
different experience. So
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I agree with that. And then to the men in this session, you both explained your experiences. You were very particular in like how you phrased, how you shared your experience. You mentioned words like duty. That's like, whenever you as a man or as a boy that you're being raised, you use words like duty, leadership. That's how you see it now, right? Whenever you're being raised, whenever they told you to do this, there were very few things that, especially for me, seeing having brothers, there were very few things that they were told to do, right? They were like, you go push this, or the heavy things. There were barely any heavy things that needed to be pushed, right? So then they will be told, oh, you need to like go to school, learn so you can be the sole provider, or like, going to be the head of the house. And then for the women, it's like the education is really not necessary because you're the secondary part. So if your husband is educated and they get all these experiences, you don't have to worry about that. So focus on the kitchen. But for me, the way you guys described it, it was very like different because you said they were teaching you how to lead, how to take the duty of being the provider, how to lead and be like, leadership. Do you feel like, you have sisters, righty? And Ubo, as you grow or like you grew up older, do you feel like your education and experience on the West has helped you look at those things differently? Or if you were still in Africa now, you would have seen it as like those usage of the words duty and leadership role compared to how like the women are treated. Men.
You can go ahead, Roddy. You can go ahead.
Thank you.
Try
Yeah.
not to get canceled.
Let's
Let's
no
honest and
cancel
careful.
culture 2025.
So I would say from my experience, the time I spend here, right, helped me see leadership differently. Just because you see a lot of women that are also great leaders, and they can achieve both being great mothers and then being good at what they do. And seeing that have helped me say, you know what, maybe Africa like that way of educating women, of seeing women that, you know what, they can lead, right? But I grew up with a mother that was always a leader, right? My mother educated me to be who I am because she lead in the most phenomenal way, right? She sell things on the market. She budget her money very well. She paid for her education, and then she taught me how to be an engineer, like studying math and all of that, whatever it required to be successful as an engineer. She taught me that, right? But she only taught me that because she saw my dad as an engineer. So she pushed me to be like a dad, right? Because she
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, he's very successful, he's organized, and I want you to be like him. But my dad, since he was playing a man's role, never had the time to do what? To teach me leadership, right? I learned leadership from a woman, right? I learned everything, most of it that was important from a woman. But if my dad was not doing his role as a leader, my mom wouldn't have that time to pour that education into me. So that's how I'm growing up, and that's how I'm willing to apply in my household. Right? I gotta work very hard so my wife can see. Okay, these are the example of a leader that I wanna teach my kids. Because if he's not, I mean, he's not there 100%, but see, I mean, here in America, obviously, we're supposed to help each other around, just like Ugo said, but it helps a lot to know how to gauge that. So your wife always, or your wife, or whoever you're dating, look up to you and say, hey, I got a leader, and then he's providing for my family, and then I can teach my kids how to gauge that as well. So, yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. But I will have a follow-up question. I'll let Ubo talk.
So the question I'm answering, how has my like Western education made my upbringing different? Like made me look at my upbringing
Mm-hmm.
from Nigeria different.
Yes.
So biggest thing is the gender roles, right? And growing up as an only child and the youngest as well, which is crazy, double whammy. I understand that the household is the responsibility of everybody in the house, but the thing is, like, you have to understand African culture allows for that, right? You're able to, as a man, go to work, come back, provide for your entire household, right? Your wife is able to stay at home, take care of the kids, take care of the home. When you come to the West, it's expensive, very, very expensive, right? So you really have to understand how can both of you go and bring the bread, and how can you prioritize who needs to take care of the home when, right? So I'm not here cooking every day, but if I need to cook, I will cook, right? I have to do what I have to do to get by. And that's the biggest thing I've learned differently from my Western upbringing, right? Because if there's no food at home, I'm not going to starve. What? I'm going to make some rice and stew or some Nigerian jollof because we know it's the best. But the thing is, like, you have to understand it takes balance. So priority, right? As a leader, someone who's raised as a leader with that leadership mindset, that provider mindset, I will go and get the bread, right? That is my job. I am focused, highly focused on that. But I am also able to stop and say, hey, the household needs some help. So I'm going to stop, take care of things I need to at home, and then continue on my journey to get the bread. So that's the difference of what I've understand from my Nigerian bringing mixed with my Western bringing. But overall, I think it gives me a more rounded perspective, and I'm only better for it, honestly.
What are some expectations for both men and women growing up in Africa? And then also, what are like, what are some expectations that, like, if you're married, do men and women have for each other in their marriage? So we'll start with like just what you have seen in Africa without the Western world, without the Western mindset. What have you seen when it comes to expectations for men versus women?
I can jump in really quickly. The
Okay.
biggest one is leadership, right? In Western culture, equality is so well taught that
Hmm.
everybody feels like they need to be a leader. But if everybody's a leader, nobody's a follower, and that can bring up a lot of challenges, especially in relationships where decisions need to be made, right? As a leader, you should be given the space to be a leader,
So who's
right?
the leader?
The leader, from an African perspective, is usually the man of the household, right? That's how we're led. That's how we're raised. The man is the one that makes the decisions. He's the one that also bears the brunt if the decision is a bad decision. He just has to take that, right? But that's the mindset we come from. And like being able to allow the woman, because when you're the leader, you allow the woman to do the things of the household, right?
Hmm.
Just as Roddy mentioned, your dad was providing, he was bringing home the bread, so your mom is able to take care of the home and the kids, right? We can't
Yeah.
all do everything. And I think that's what the Western culture has really taught everyone, good or bad is your perspective. But you have to understand that you need to have those desired roles for everyone to succeed at what they're doing. So that's
Okay.
my answer.
Linda, you have something?
Yeah, going. I guess from what I've seen, I would say Africa specifically is very much like textbook what gender roles are. I
Mm-hmm.
think, yes, there's a little bit of influence from Western culture, but if I think about a lot of people that are still back home, people that have been raised right now, women, you are there to serve your husband. If we're talking in the context of marriage, you're there to serve your husband, take care of your kids, raise them, right? Men, you're there to provide and honestly not even hold up the loyalty of what a marriage should be. It's kind of like if you can provide for your family and you can take care of your kids, send them to school, that's where it ends. You don't really
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to spend any quality time with them. You don't necessarily have to cater to your woman, especially compared to like how Western culture makes it to where, your wife is your priority or date night. There's none of that nonsense back home. You pay your bills, you send your kids to school and you come home and the meal needs to be ready, the house needs to be clean, and the kids need to be taken care of. So I would say like probably 80% of most African households that I know that are back home follow the typical women, you're the follower, the head of the household is the man. And there's no like blurred lines. Like everybody kind of understands what they're supposed to be doing and just do it. And of course, there's those, nuances. So I think that's the expectation still. As a young girl, I feel like it's evolving more so than in marriage. I think especially before, education was a little bit more varied in terms of how kids, how girls were looked at versus boys. I feel like there's just been more movement in terms of every child deserves to go to school. So the gender roles are still there in terms of most of the girls are probably the ones that are, cooking and cleaning and still taking care of the household. And the boys have a little bit more freedom. But in terms of expectations on studying and getting educated, the playing field is getting a little bit more even. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, yes. But Linda's right about that, you know, about her comments. Most women in Africa really, you say, but it's they don't get enough affection from the husband. I don't know why. I think the affection gets with time, that's when you start building up. But after they have kids, I don't think men in Africa are affectionate among the ladies. I think they should work on that. But other than that, I think he's right. 80% of people in Africa percent of women in Africa goes through that, and that also kind of doesn't help with raising children, right? Because at the end of the day, you still need the same connection that you had with your husband when you got married. So guess who feel all the pain? Sometimes it's kids, right? Because they get all the frustration, right? You end up having a mean mom or someone just give you orders all day. So it become a household where just like, okay, I did what I had to do today, leave me alone, right? You came in, I gave you food, but it's very hard to see them like have conversation, right? You see that early in the marriage, but for most family, you don't see that. For most family, you don't see that. And then you can tell the difference when you grow up in a household where your mom and your dad can connect and they can have fun. You can see it through the kids as well. When you don't see that, when they're very detached, you can also see that over time. But besides that, to answer your question, I think we just play by the book, man. The man does his thing and the woman does his thing, and respectfully, as long as you doing your job, she's doing her job, I think everything's good. And majority of them don't believe in divorce, so they don't believe in divorce. Majority of them.
Ubo.
Yeah, Roddy, to add on to what you mentioned, it's growing up in Nigeria, it gave a very one-dimensional view of what a marriage should be. It's like, here's your duty as a man, here's your duty as a woman. Everything else, no one cares, right? Forgoing the need that we have as humans for connection, right? Being able to connect with your partner, feeling secure, feeling that trust. These are things you don't learn at all. All you learn is, hey, as a man, you make the money, and that's all that matters. Right. So I think that's one thing I personally enjoyed about getting westernized is understanding there's a lot more below the layers that really matter to a successful marriage. It's not just
Hmm.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I think what's funny, the belief in divorce in the Western culture has really strengthened. Let's put it strengthened our need for a deeper understanding for each other. It's not just we're married and that's it. We're locked in for life. It's like, are you giving me what I need to succeed as a person, not just as a man or just as a woman? So just wanted to add that beat on there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so you all talked about something, loyalty. I think Linda's the one that brought it up, with the way, like, in African culture, we have those set roles that, they go by the book, where a man is conditioned to do this, a woman is conditioned to do this, or educated, or, raised to do these things. And then you have a situation where they're raising a man to be responsible, to lead the household, to have all the power, and then the woman is raised to give away the power so that the husband or the primary person in her life can have most of the power and have the say. Do you think this contributes to like infidelity and also the belief in man being able to have more than one wife, but a woman cannot go and seek an additional companion?
I guess I don't know. I don't know if I would say that the men are being raised to have all the power and then the women are being raised to give up the power.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I just feel like when you think about traditional values, or depending where you're coming from, like for my country, for Zambia, it's a Christian nation. They very much believe Adam was created. You came from Adam's rib. He is the sole provider. And honestly, I agree with that. I just feel like two heads can't lead. Like someone needs to be the head, someone needs to be the neck. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a COO versus a CEO at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So I don't see it as like giving power away. But then again, like I said, it's relative. I just think if you try to talk about loyalty, I mean, the men, please don't attack me, but men in general, men are just, they're special. I don't know what's wrong with them. So that already comes with the difficulty in it, right? I just think that in general, when people start making money or they're in a provision, they're more likely to just feel like they have more control. Like Rodin gave a lot of examples in raising kids or taking care of the household. Like that's a different version of control. Like there's a lot of men that don't know how anything gets done around the house or how things even get moving. And if you just give them one day, these people will probably collapse, right? And you can look at it as a certain control. But just something about money and power, especially when it comes with men, it feeds the ego on a different level that I feel like that kind of leads into the, I mean, hey, I can do
The
this.
second
There's
wife.
a lot more. Yeah, the thoughts are too many. Like you just attract more things the more money you make. So I think that contributes more to it. So I don't know if the children themselves are being raised. Like as a girl, I never felt like I was being raised like, hey, you get married, you give it up or whatever. You give up your power. It was just like you get married, be educated in case worst case scenario something happened to your husband or your spouse. But
Mm,
the default is not like I'm going into this marriage thinking I have to provide, I have to take care of everything. I'm there to support in case we need to fall back on. But I was always like brought up to know that I'm a partner, and depending on where my partner is at will dictate how much effort I have to put in terms of like financial contribution, right?
yeah,
It just depends. There's a lot of African people that I know back home where their wife is the doctor and their dad is like, a taxi driver, and they still work as hard, but the woman just makes more. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that was just my little 2 cents on the having more power versus not. And then the loyalty part, I don't that's a little different thing.
So, man, do you have anything for us? If you don't have
yeah.
anything, that means you're guilty. So, I'm just saying, it looks worse if you don't have anything.
They have something.
So the loyalty part, right? The loyalty part is both ways, right? I've seen women ruin marriage, right? And just because they were not loyal to a man that leave home for a long time to provide for the family, and because they have this assumption that the man is cheating, but he's actually working. Especially if you're very business,
Rodney.
if you're a businessman, right, and you work so hard, and what is your thought at home when you know, like, okay, your wife, she's fine, and then she has kids. What is she doing? Like, you at work, you may think about it too. Like, man, what is she doing? Like when I'm not home, like,
With the kid,
yeah,
she's
with the
tired.
kids, but it's the same. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like when it comes to cheating and all of that, I think it's vice versa. You can go both ways. I'm still working, and then you're at home with the kids. The kids go to school. Hey, you may go find a taxi driver. I don't know. So when it comes to power, there's a power dynamic in the household that can be shifted depending on what you see as I'm taking your power away, right? Am I taking your power from disciplining children? Am I taking your power from imposing certain rules, right? Because there is women out there. When you come in, you gotta be. If she said don't put your shoes there, it doesn't matter if you're a husband, you come home tired. You gotta put your shoes where it belongs because she's the one who clean after you. You can just come and dump your things everywhere, right? Like there's women that have like that sense of like, I mean, I grew up in a house where my dad come home. My dad knew exactly where my mom wanted him to put his pants. Like you can't just come and drop your pants on the couch because when my dad show up in the house, he understand like, yo, I'm the leader in this house, but I gotta respect the person that cleaned. So, so there's a power shift on that you look at. You're like, you know what? My dad don't act silly. When he sit down, when he finish eating, he set his plate on the table and he sit down, and then my mom come and take it. Because guess what? A power shift would be, you know what? Let me grab this plate and go clean it. I'm gonna do your job because you don't know how to do your job. So you can see sometimes African women will get upset with that, right? When you finish eating as a man, and then you go clean your plate, and they get offended. They're like, "Yo, what are you doing? Go sit down, go watch TV. Let me do that for you." Right? Like, so there's a power shift, power dynamic changing here and then. I think that depends on the situation right there. But the cheating part, really, it's both ways. It goes both ways.
He's going to double down on that. Ubo, go
We'll come
ahead.
back to that one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come back. Ubo, go ahead and finish
Yeah,
us too. Roddy has
yeah.
started. Just go ahead and finish us.
I'm gonna say a very unpopular opinion. Women are better at hiding cheating than men are. Let's just be frank about
Boy,
it. Women are better at it than men are. Men are just a little more obvious, and obviously the woman knows more about the home than the man ever could.